There's two things to worry about. One is bad actors, whether that's individuals or all the way up to nation states, repurposing these technologies that we're trying to build for good, like curing diseases and advancing material science and energy and so on, for harmful ends, right? And whether that's inadvertently or intentionally. And then the second branch of things I worry about is the AI itself going rogue. Or going off the rails, if as they get more powerful. That's not today's systems, but maybe in the next 2, 3, 4 years, especially as we go towards more of the agentic era, which we're entering now.
That's Demis Hassabis, the guy running Google DeepMind, a Nobel Prize winner, telling you he's worried about his own creation going rogue in the next 2 to 4 years, not a critic on the outside. The guy building it. Here's the whole conversation.
There's a very famous Go player that sits down to play against a system that you designed. Mm-hmm. And at this point, computers have beat humans at all kinds of games. But Go is really interesting because there are more potential moves in Go than atoms in the universe.
Yes.
They go back and forth, they're playing. And then your system makes a move that is so surprising because it is incredibly unlikely that a human would figure out a move like that.
Yeah.
Move 37.
Yes.
And you see Lisa Dahl sitting there. He's just got this shock on his face. He's got his head in his hands like this. And it really was this moment where I think people like yourself saw ahead to the creativity that we would find in AI systems that are very different than the systems that we've talked about so far. So there's a category where you're giving a huge amount of data and you're asking to make new predictions. And I understand this is much more complicated than this oversimplification. But then there's a category where you're not giving data, you're giving rules, like with math or physics or games, like Go. And it has this incredible opportunity for creativity.
Yeah.
Where were you when that moment happened? And what future did you see ahead?
Yeah, it was an incredible moment that you're describing, and it's actually almost exactly 10 years ago now, which is feels like a century ago, actually. But I think in many ways it was the dawn of the modern AI era, because until that point, there were many AI programs that could beat world champions at games, things like chess, but they were done with what's called expert systems. So they were systems where a team of smart programmers with a team of smart, in that case, chess grandmasters, came together, tried to distill the knowledge the chess grandmasters have into a set of rules and heuristics. And then the programmers would build a system, kind of a brute force system, that would use a lot of compute, like on a supercomputer, like IBM did with Deep Blue, to beat Garry Kasparov, and they would sort of encapsulate the rules they were given by the chess experts. And then the system would sort of dumbly execute those rules and heuristics and do millions and millions of searching of moves, and then try and work out against those heuristics which is the best one to do. Now, the thing with that is, for me, that was not satisfactory when I saw that in the 90s. I was doing my undergrad at the time. I didn't feel like that was proper AI, because that system, let's take Deep Blue, okay, it's world champion level at chess, but it can't do anything else. Not only can't it do, language and robotics or any of those kind of things, it can't even play a strictly simpler game like tic-tac-toe, right? So something's obviously not quite right about the definition of intelligence, right? In the sense of like no human, you could imagine a human grandmaster not being able to learn how to play tic-tac-toe. It would make no sense because it's strictly simpler. So there's something sort of wrong about its generalization capability and the fact that it didn't learn. It was just given the answer, right? So if you could ask for something like Deep Blue, where did the intelligence reside of the system? Well, it wasn't in the system. It was in the minds of the chess grandmasters and the programmers. They solved the problem of chess and then implemented the solution. The program just dumbly executed the solution.
So a machine broke a rule. Go masters followed for centuries, and it turned out to be the winning move 100 moves later. That's not pattern matching, that's the system finding something no human ever saw. And once you've built something that can do that, you can't fully predict what else it finds. Now listen.
I think AlphaZero is very interesting to talk about, which was the evolution of AlphaGo. So after we won, got to the pinnacle of Go and showed that it could come up with new ideas, at least in Go, Move 37, and actually many other ideas that it came up with, which has revolutionized how professionals play Go now. We then generalized it further to a system called AlphaZero, which I think is going to turn out to be a very important system for today as well, where with AlphaGo, we started with all the human games that we could find on the internet. And also there were a few other couple of things that were specific about Go that were built into the AlphaGo system, like the symmetry of the board and things like that. So we wanted to get rid of all of those assumptions completely and actually start from scratch, as if the program and the algorithm didn't know anything about what it was trying to do to start off with. And that's why this is what the zero refers to in AlphaZero, is it's sort of like AlphaGo, but now removing any knowledge, human crafted knowledge, both in the data and in the any of the kind of heuristics that we'd given the system. So AlphaZero starts like tabula rasa almost. Obviously has a learning system, it's got a neural network. We set up the parameters, but we didn't give it any domain specific knowledge about Go or any other game. And then what we tested AlphaZero on was, first of all, could it learn Go from scratch and then be AlphaGo? Right? So, and we managed to do that. So it takes 17 evolutions of the program. So you can imagine what happens is AlphaZero starts off random to begin with. It only has the rules of the game, plays randomly. Obviously, it's terrible at playing. It creates its own data set by playing 100,000 games against itself, right? And then it can see which moves won or lost. And even though it's playing more or less randomly to begin with, there'll be some moves that are slightly better than other moves, okay? So now it takes the 100,000, we train a new version of itself on version 2 now of AlphaZero with that new data. That version 2 is slightly better than version 1. So now it's not random anymore, but it's not great. It's not good, but it's playing like okay moves. And then those okay moves end up being better. And so then a version 2 gets trained, a version 3, a version 4. And so each time that new system gets played against the old system and sees, is it significantly better or not? And it turns out that at least in Go and chess and things like that, around 16, 17 generations of that is enough to go from random to better than world champion. And at least in the case of chess, which I actually once watched live happen, because I was fascinated by obviously playing chess myself, is, it starts in the morning, random, then by lunchtime I could still just about compete with it myself, and then by tea time it's better than all grandmasters, and then by dinner time it's better than the world champion. And you've just seen the entire evolution of that from scratch. And also it's playing interesting new chess that even chess computers like Stockfish, with the kind of expert system brute force ones, haven't discovered those new types of moves. So AlphaZero was the full generalization of the AlphaGo ideas. And interestingly, I think we need these types of ideas back in now with our foundation models, the new Gemini and these kinds of things, which you can think of as generalized models of everything, language, the world around us, not just a game, obviously like Go, but we still need this ability to search and think and reason on top of those models. And sometimes we call those world models. And I think that still hasn't fully been cracked yet.
Random in the morning, better than the best human alive by dinner. And he says himself that the reasoning layer on top of today's models still isn't cracked. So the piece they're racing to finish is the exact piece that turns a chatbot into something that plans on its own. Now listen.
And by agents, I mean systems that are capable of completing entire tasks on their own. So you can, of course, we want those because they'll be very useful, like as an assistant or something like that. But also that means they'll be increasingly capable and autonomous. And so how do we make sure as one of the frontier labs, and the frontier labs all have to think about this, is the guardrails are put in place that we can ensure that they do exactly what they've been told to do, or the goals they've been given, and they've been specified clearly enough, and there's no way of them circumventing that or accidentally breaching those guardrails. And that's an incredibly hard technical challenge if you think about how powerful and how smart and capable these systems eventually going to get. So I tend to worry about those that you could call them medium term now, even though 3-4 years is not really medium term. But those are the things I think people are perhaps not paying enough attention to at the moment. I think will be the biggest issues that we're going to have to contend with if we're going to get through the AGI moment in a way that's beneficial for humanity.
He doesn't say the guardrail problem is solved, he calls it incredibly hard while these systems are already being handed whole tasks to complete on their own. That's not a future risk he's flagging, that's an open problem right now. Listen to this.
The downside of it is that we're in this sort of ferocious commercial pressure race that everyone's sort of locked into currently. And then on top of that, there's geopolitical issues like the US-China race and so on. So there's sort of multiple levels of pressure to sort of move fast. So the benefit of that, of course, you get faster progress, obviously. So, the progress is just like at lightning speed these days. So that's good for all the good use cases. The second benefit is that everybody, all of the viewers out there, everyone, you're all getting to use the most cutting edge AI technology, perhaps only 3 to 6 months behind what is actually in the labs. So that's kind of mind blowing. It's also great because I think it gives everyone a feeling it's democratizing AI. It's giving everyone a feeling for what it's like to interact with cutting edge AI and what it can do and what it can't do. And I think that's good for society to start normalizing itself to what is going to be an enormous change with this technology coming. So it's probably better that we get to sample that in incremental steps rather than it's just a shock to the system. Here's no AGI and then here's AGI one day. Probably that's not good, although I think there could have been many ways it could have rolled out. And then the final thing that's actually on the benefit side is that you can't really fully understand your systems until they're stress tested by millions of people. So it doesn't matter how good your testing is and your in-house testing. Obviously, millions of smart people trying out things and then you seeing what bubbles to the top or the feedback you get is really important for building more robust systems and better systems. So I think there's positives about and negatives about how the way it's gone. It's not the way I dreamed about years ago, where we would be sort of contemplating this philosophically and sort of carefully considering each next step. We're not in that world, and although I'm a scientist first and foremost, I'm also a pragmatic engineer. So we have to deal with the world as we find it and make the best of that. And we try to do that by advancing the frontier, but also trying to be as responsible as we can with doing that as we deploy these, very powerful technologies like Gemini and AlphaFold.
He wanted decades of careful science before AGI. Instead, he's got a race driven by commercial pressure and competition with China. When the man building it tells you speed is coming from pressure and not caution, that tells you who's actually in the driver's seat. Now listen to this.
If we play this out, what's the limit here? What are the things that you think AI cannot do that humans can do? You've called this the central question of your life.
Yes, it is. And it's very related to, some scientific thinking of some of my all-time heroes like Alan Turing. He described Turing machines, which were these theoretical constructs that actually all modern computers are basically Turing machines that are able to compute anything that's computable. So anything that can be described as an algorithm that this type of machine can compute. And I think that the systems we're building are approximate Turing machines. And potentially a lot of neuroscientists, including me, think that maybe the brain, a good model for the brain, is an approximate Turing machine. So the question is, but there are others like friends of mine like Roger Penrose, who believes there might be some quantum effect in the brain, right? And I'm sure you've probably done videos about that. And he, we've had some very good-natured debates about this. But so far, neuroscience hasn't found any quantum effects in the brain. Doesn't mean they won't be found, but so far people have looked quite carefully and we haven't found any. And we don't understand a lot of quantum effects and gravity properly and consciousness. Most of the things we care about, but we just sort of, I feel like most people, we just distract ourselves all day with TV shows and games and things and don't worry too much about it. But I've never been like that. It's sort of these deep mysteries kind of play on my mind all the time. And I think I'm quite open-minded about what the answers might be eventually about what's going on here, the nature of reality. I think that's ultimately what I'm after. And I want to use AI as a tool to help us understand the nature of reality around it. And I'm quite sanguine about whatever the answer might be. I'm not, I guess I'm a true scientist in that sense of like, I don't really have any pre-described notion of what the answer should be. I just want to know the answer.
Me too.
The guy running one of the most powerful AI labs on the planet just told you he can't find the ceiling because by his own science, there may not be one. Long-term planning, reasoning, creativity, the exact things we've used to separate ourselves from the machine, he expects AI to eventually do all of it. Combine that with a guardrail problem he admits isn't solved and a race he calls ferocious, and you understand why he keeps circling back to the word worried. If that unsettles you, stay subscribed because nobody's slowing down to explain the rest of it.